Oh.
What's good, everybody? It's
PGAF, your first PGAF. PGAF.
And today I'm going to talk about how I ended up in the top 5 for Kenny Beats beat battles twice and how you can do it too. Now, the first time I ended up in the top 10 was 2 weeks ago, and after all the judging was done, I got moved up to the 4th spot. And honestly, I think it's because the other beats just weren't that good. Luckily though, everyone loved my beat. Fortunately, the gift I won, the Prince, was a plugin that I already had, so I was able to participate the next week and redeem myself a little. I ended up in the 10th spot, and after judging was done, I moved up to 5th, and honestly it seemed like people liked that beat a lot better. And so that's going to be the beat that I'm breaking down today, so let's get into it. Now, the first thing that I want to go over for this beat is the template that I use when I'm going into a beat battle, or I want to just get an idea down quickly. Now, I typically have my favorite kick sounds loaded up. I have snares, claps, hats, open hi-hats, some other percussion stuff going on as well. And then I also just have my guitar setup, which is typically, if I'm going to record guitar, it's the Archetype Corey Wong. Highly recommend it. Definitely the best sounding guitar VST that I know of. And then also run it into an Uber mod, which I got from watching Kenny Beats streams. And it sounds amazing. Now, also in the template, I have some other plugins going on as well. Like on the kick channel, I believe I have trash on there in case I want to make the kick more distorted. On the hat channel, I have a decapitator and also a throw-off delay. Now, this is something that I learned from another beat battle breakdown that I watched. And this makes it so that the hats come a bit later. They kind of feel more like a live drummer. And I'm going to link the video to that beat battle breakdown down below as well, because I definitely learned a lot from it. There's some other things going on in this template as well. There's a sidechain capability. What is it? Chamberbox? Yeah. It's like a multi-band sidechain plugin. You can actually design the shapes themselves and save them. And then I just drag in the kick MIDI into my sidechain MIDI channels, and then it'll do it for the sidechain group and the bass group. And then I don't have to set anything up beforehand. I can just load up this template, and then I'm ready to go and ready to make my beat. Now, the sample may not be the most important thing in your beat, but you definitely need to make sure to get it in there and make sure it sounds good. I definitely have seen, like on this last battle, it was a guy playing the sax on the New York City subway, and a lot of people just looped it and put some drums over it. I listened to probably 100 beats, and probably like 95 of them just did that. And that works if you're using a good sample. The thing is, in these Kenny Beat battles, it's never a good sample. The one 2 weeks ago that I also got 4th in, it was a rat playing the harmonica. It just is not going to sound good on its own. Now, there's 3 methods that I usually approach like sample chopping or like sample manipulation. The first one is going to be tossing it in a simpler. The second one is going to be using granular synthesis, which is kind of like more of an EDM technique. Flume uses it a lot. And the third one is tossing it in a vocoder. Now in this project, I used the simpler method. So you can see I tossed it into simpler and I found a single note. I'm going to solo this as well. I found a single note, and I believe it was a F sharp when I was playing it, or an F. And then I just detuned it so that it went to just the middle C so that you could play it like a normal keyboard. And I did a lot of manipulation on it so that it sounded a lot better, because without any of these plugins, it sounded still pretty bad. First thing I ran it through was Pro Q3, just taking out a lot of the low ends. OTT, of course. Devil Lock, which you'll see I've been using more and more just as like a straight distortion. It sounds amazing. And then I'm going into Soothe, because it definitely needed that kind of harmonic control in there as well. And then more EQing, a lot of EQing. This is definitely shaping the sound so it fits a lot better in the mix. Some widening with micro shift, and then vintage verb, of course. And even though it didn't sound like the original sample, it definitely made it a lot better. I saw people in the chat being like, I don't even hear the sample, but it was there. I'm also going to make a video on those 3 other sampling methods because honestly, it sounds like some people need it. And I feel like with the whatever 20 plus beats I've made with terrible samples, I think I can offer some good insight on it. What I've learned from doing these beat battles is that the drums are basically the most important part of the beat. They need to have a good swing to it, good rhythm, and good sound selection as well. I took Kenny's advice from the last beat that I won from 2 weeks ago to get better samples, and this is kind of why I redid my template. I just felt that a lot of the sounds I was using, it sounded like an Oliver sample pack type beat. So I decided to switch it up a little, and this one I used I believe like the Robotaki kick, or no, it was a count kick, of course. And then I used, what snare did I go for? Robotaki snare, great snares. I know OK Sammy uses them as well. And then I believe an Oliver clap and some live, what are these? Some count hi-hats. And then for the drum processing, I took kind of like a Tame Impala approach and used Devil Lock and FabFilter Saturn. These are great sounding. I think like the Devil Lock is an analog emulation of the compressor that Tame Impala uses on his drums. And then FabFilter is a distortion plugin. And then I ran those guys into Pro Q and Soothe just to take off some of the high ends. Without Devil Lock, it's definitely a lot darker and it'll brighten it up to the point where it's a little too harsh. So I definitely felt like the Pro Q and the Soothe 2 were very important in this chain. So here are the drums with and without the drum bus. Yeah, with drum processing, it just sounds so much fuller and it just knocks. It actually feels like it kind of hits you in the chest when you're listening on speakers. The next thing that I wanted to show you guys were the chords and melodies that I used in this. Now, this is what I use as kind of the starting point of the beat. And I actually used a plugin called Scalar. Now, what this plugin does is that it gives you voicings. It has like a lot of different artist presets in there, and I use it a lot mostly because I'm a guitar player, so I'm not great at the keys. So this gives great kind of more keyboard focused voicings that sound good on their own. So that's playing an entire chord just by playing a single note into Scalar. The main chord sound that I used in this was a Prince preset that I modified a little bit. I think the preset was called Elegant Tension, and then I messed with the ADSR to make it swell a little bit going into it. And I also tossed on some vintage verb to give it some space. Some of the other chords I added, later on in the beat, I used a DX type sound. It's mostly just like an operator with some FM and some chorus on it. And also when doing the chords for this, I used the performance strumming. Then in the second half of the beat, I used another Prince preset just pitched up an octave, and this one was Chubby Basket. And honestly, it sounds great. And here's how they sound all together. For the bass in this, I just copied the bass that Disclosure uses in their Streets remix. It's basically just like a Moog type bass. And I had this as a preset so I could just load it up as soon as I knew that I wanted this kind of sound in it. For the master chain in this, I made sure to make and save an audio effect rack with all the mastering effects that I wanted on this, so it would just save me time and I could just load it in and adjust some things so that I wouldn't have to spend a ton of time mastering the beat at the end and trying to make it sound good. And it follows a pretty simple mastering technique. I just did Pro Q3, cutting off some of that harsh high ends, and then using the subgroup sorcery. I learned this from a Count story, and he said that if you want your beats to sound like his, then use this. Mine still don't, but at least they like tonally do a little more. And then ran into some light OTT. I don't know if I'd recommend this. OTT is pretty aggressive, so I have the downward compression at like 50%, upward at 0, and the depth at about 30. And then I ran that into Soothe 2 to take off some more of that high end and maybe a little bit of that like muddy low ends. And from there, I just did some imaging, especially in the top end, and then making sure that the low end was completely mono. And then from there, I just did a Pro L. And yeah, it sounded pretty good, just adjusting some things, and it saved me a lot of time in my mastering. For some of the extras in this beat, I just used Kenny calling my beat a JCPenney type beat as the tag. It just seemed to fit pretty well just going into the beat.
This does sound like JCPenney.
I also made sure to include at the end just a little message for Kenny about how to say my name, because in the last time he did it, he said it PGAF, and I just wanted to make sure he said it PGAF. Honestly, call me whatever you want. I just go by PGAF because my name is Patrick Gaffney, and people just call me PGAF, and that's like my Instagram handle. A lot of friends call me Pat, Patrick, whatever you want. Just go for it. Now, some key takeaways from this beat battle. I started making beats for the beat battle probably about a year and a half ago, and honestly, at the start, they were bad. I would typically get about 3 to 6 votes on like a good day, but luckily I stuck with it, and I just saw it as a way to practice finishing beats and practicing getting better at like the beat battles as well. And soon enough, I started seeing more and more votes. Sometimes I would get like 10, sometimes I would get like 15, and then 3 weeks ago was the first time that I ended up, I think, at the 22nd spot, which is 2 away from actually being judged. And I was like, oh, I actually have a chance of getting into this beat battle, so I started to take it a lot more seriously. And especially after my beat got heavily roasted in terms of pocket, sample selection, that entire next week I just spent going over beat battle breakdowns, watching a lot of Memblem videos, watching a lot of spell videos, looking at how I can improve sample selection and improve my pocket at least a little bit. I still have a lot of stuff to work on. Like Kenny said, my pocket was I think like a kid's bop swing to it. And I've noticed that like even tossing in like a count loop to that beat makes it sound a lot better. So yeah, thank you for providing some constructive feedback on my beat, even though you wanted to roast it at first. I definitely have a lot of stuff to work on. I'd love any more tips about like pocket and swing. And thank you to all those who voted on my beat as well.